Today on Classic Mini DIY and Operation Bad Wolf, we're going to bleed the brakes. Alright, like I said at the beginning, we're going to be bleeding the brakes today. But we are going to be tackling it using an Eezibleed system. This is made by Gunson. Now, they haven't paid me to advertise this or anything. I've gotten a few recommendations from some of the viewers who recommended using this if I find myself bleeding my brakes by myself or bleeding my brakes alone. This is a tool that's supposed to, theoretically, help you bleed your brakes if there's nobody around to help you at any given time. So, the way that it works is pretty cool, and I'm going to show you guys how this works in just a sec. Now in the Classic Mini, there are two different places that your brake master cylinder could be living. Now if you have a left-hand drive car, it's going to be on the left side of your car, and if you have a right-hand drive car, it's going to be on the right side of your car. They sit in the engine compartment, and they're usually made out of like a bright chrome metal, or they're made out of a plastic, kind of like a plastic container. And these hold the brake fluid, and they operate the brakes on your Classic Mini. When you press the pedal down, it pressurizes the fluid inside these master cylinders, and then it's going to deliver that pressure out to the different four wheels on your car. Now, bleeding the brakes on this car is not super complex. First, you're going to figure out what side your brake master cylinder sits on, and in my case, the master cylinder sits on the right-hand side of the car because I have a right-hand drive Mini. Now, when you're bleeding the brakes, you're going to want to bleed them in a specific order. And with my car having the master cylinder on the right-hand side, what I'm going to be doing is picking the brake that is the farthest away from the master cylinder to get started. And in this case, that is the back left wheel. After you finish the back left wheel, you'll move on to the back right wheel. And then finally, you'll move to the front left and then the front right. And that is going to do the best job of getting all of the air out of these lines. Now, back in the shop here, we have our Gunson Eezibleed system. Now, this system is made specifically for you to be able to bleed the system easily and alone, specifically, you know, forever alone. Anyway, if you don't have people who can help you out bleeding the system, this is a perfect tool. Or if you really just don't want to be reliant on somebody else being available to press the brake pedal or climb under the car and break open the seal and everything to let the fluid out, this is a good alternative. I've got links to this if you're interested in picking it up. There are links down in my description for US people and folks that are worldwide. So, the way that this works is not that complicated. First, you have your Eezibleed system, this container here, and that hose goes all the way down into this container. Now, this container gets filled up with brake fluid. This has to remain full while you're working on the car. Now, this gets sealed shut, nice and tight. This other end right here with the kind of like metal washer thingy here, this gets attached to one of the various caps that come with the system. Now, I haven't tested any of these caps yet, but one of these is bound to fit on that old Classic Mini's master cylinder. So this hose right here goes through and it creates an airtight seal for your brake master cylinder system. Pretty cool. That gets placed on there, and then this is always going to be feeding fluid into that master cylinder as you're bleeding it yourself. Now, the last thing, and the part that makes this pretty unusual, is that it connects to a tire. This connects to the valve stem on a spare tire, for example. That's the one that they kind of advertise it. That's how it works. And it has to have no more than 20 psi. If it's more than that, it's too much. You should reduce the pressure in your tire, and then you connect this up. But then that pressurizes the system and helps push that fluid out through the lines where you can just sit at the back, open it up, wait for that fluid to push all the air out of the line, and close it back up. It's pretty cool. So let's jump out to the car, and I'm going to attach this up and show you guys how it works. All right, so first thing that we're going to be doing here is taking off the cap on your master cylinder here. So now you've got kind of a good idea of what a master cylinder setup might look like, and you are going to want to prepare your brake fluid. Now, in my case, I'm going to use DOT 3 and 4 brake fluid. This works for both the clutch master cylinder and the brake master cylinder. These systems use a simple, effectively hydraulic fluid. Now, I'm not totally certain if you have the same signifier over C's dot 3 and 4, but you are going to want this equivalent for your Classic Mini. Now, this job is something that is a little messy. It's something I'd strongly recommend putting gloves on for. Brake fluid can be a little aggressive. It's not exactly the nicest fluid to work with. It will remove paint, so make sure that when you're doing this, you take extra care, use yourself a funnel, and make sure that you don't spill this. Just take your time and go ahead and fill up your master cylinder so that it is full of fluid. In my case, I've only lost a little bit when I took the brakes off when I started this project. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this back up. And then once you've got that filled up, you're going to want to fill up the reservoir that came with your Eezibleed system. I'm going to do this off screen real quick, but the general idea with this is that you just need to keep this full as you're working on this system, because if this runs out, it's going to start pushing air back into your system and it's going to defeat the purpose of bleeding it. So I'm going to set that fluid off to the side here. And in a lovely turn of events, a company actually provided me a tool that fits on my Classic Mini without any sort of modification. So that's an extremely nice change of pace. And it came with a cap that fits. So you'll see there's a rubber ring in there, and then this is bolted on. So you're actually going to have to tighten this nut down on here. Make sure to take extra care. You want to keep this sealed, but you also don't want to tighten the crap out of it because it can break the plastic. So we're going to tighten that down onto our master cylinder here. Make sure that's good and tight because we want that to have an airtight seal. So now we've got our fluid in there, pretty cool. All right, and then all we have to do now is connect our little stem connection here to one of our spare tires. And don't forget to make sure that that's no more than 20 PSI because you don't want any more pressure moving through this system. So now what we're looking at in the back here is our rear braking system. And this is the back left side, like I said, the side that we need to start on. And what I've got here is a small hose with a soft rubber end on one side connected to just a little jar for collection here. Now this is my old brake bleeding system, but in the event that I was bleeding this with a friend or anything, this would be the step where someone would be pressing on the brake pedal and we'd be opening and closing this valve, which I'm not really going to go into that process because it's not being used here. But what we're going to do is simply open up this valve here, and we're going to let the Gunson system push that air and fluid right out of that system. And as you can see, we get lots of air bubbles here, but we are going to hold this up here until there is simply no more air coming out, which it looks like we're there. All right, and so that's it. You let all the air and the fluid out here until there's no more air showing up, and then you simply repeat that process on the other back wheel. And then we're going to move up to the front of the car and do the front two wheels as well, which I'll show you here next. Now the front of the car, if you have discs, you're going to have a slightly larger bleed nipple, but the process is still identical to the rear. You simply connect up your bleeding system here. Go ahead and connect that up. Make sure you have pressure running to that line, and then we will bleed the front. And then repeat that process on the other wheel, and you are done. One small thing I do want to mention is that you are going to want to take care to keep brake fluid off of other parts. Just a reminder, because that does cause paint loss. All right, so I don't know if it felt this way from your perspective, but that was literally the easiest it's ever been for me to bleed my brakes. One thing that I didn't show you guys, the first time that you press the brakes after bleeding it, they'll probably kind of like travel all the way to the floor. Come back, press one more time, and you should have pressure at that point. If you don't, then you either bled it wrong, you left one of the lines open, or you didn't let all of the air out of the system before you really started, testing the brakes, which means that you would need to start back at the beginning, bleed, 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 test again. But this thing, honestly, worth its weight in gold to me. I am so glad that I bought this. I purchased this with my own money. This was not, like I said, this was not given to me by Gunson, but thank you so much, Gunson, for making this. It's amazing. But if you're looking for a more in-depth dive into brakes in general, You can check out my other video up here. Also, Steveston Motor Company did an incredibly good video on the brakes and everything for this car. I'd check them out as well. But that's it for this episode of Classic Mini DIY and Operation Bad Wolf. I know it was a short one. I am still kind of working on some of the timing issues with the car, some of the little just things that are still kind of nagging right now. Once I get through those, I will be showing you guys a brand new, really cool breather system that I'm going to be connecting up with AN lines. That's going to be coming up here in the next few weeks. And then hopefully, I will be taking this out for a rip and seeing how it drives. And that, of course, I will bring you guys along with me on my first drive. But that's it for Classic Mini DIY today. So until next time, enjoy those minis and motor on.